The overhead lights of East Wing flickered on at precisely 0600 hours, bathing the stark, sterile environment of Proxima Station's galactic menagerie in clinical white light. The illumination crept across the polished floor, climbing the transparent polyglass walls of Specimen 734's enclosure, revealing a solitary figure seated cross-legged in the center of what was designed to resemble a native habitat. Jim Praxton yawned, running his hand through his disheveled brown hair as he checked the atmospheric regulation systems on his handheld terminal. As a life support engineer, his morning routine was invariable: check humidity levels, adjust atmospheric composition, ensure temperature stability, and move on to the next exhibit. For 3 years, he had performed this task with mechanical efficiency, never giving much thought to the sentient beings housed behind the transparent barriers. East Wing specialized in endangered sentient species, those approaching extinction or, in some cases like Specimen 734, the last of their kind. The menagerie presented these beings as educational exhibits, preserved examples of cosmic biodiversity. At least, that's what the brochure claimed. Today, however, something caught Jim's attention. Specimen 734, the female Nixarian, sat perfectly still, as she always did, draped in what the curators called traditional garb, but what Jim suspected was a fabricated costume designed to seem exotic to visitors. Her skin was a luminous shade of blue, almost translucent in the artificial light, and her silver-white hair cascaded down her back in intricate braids, woven with beads that caught the light. But it was her eyes that arrested him this morning, large, almond-shaped, with vertical pupils that reminded him of a cat's. Something about them seemed different. Jim hesitated at the maintenance alcove panel. The one-way observation glass allowed him to view her without being seen. At least, that's what he'd always been told. But today, as he adjusted the humidity settings, the Nixarian turned her head ever so slightly toward the hidden maintenance panel where he stood. A chill ran down his spine. Could she sense him? The morning tour group hadn't arrived yet, leaving the wing quiet except for the gentle hum of life support systems. Jim found himself lingering longer than usual, watching as the Nixarian rose gracefully to her feet and approached the front-facing glass wall of her enclosure, the one visitors viewed her through. She raised one slender blue hand and began to trace something in the condensation that had formed on the glass. Curious, Jim moved to a different angle, trying to make out what she was drawing. It appeared to be some kind of symbol, intricate and flowing, unlike anything he recognized from the standard Nixarian information display. The symbol seemed to pulse with meaning, its curves and lines speaking of something ancient and profound. Before he could study it further, the humidity control automatically engaged, clearing the condensation and erasing the mysterious glyph. Jim checked his terminal, confirming that the system had registered the increased moisture and responded accordingly. But in that moment of clarity before the symbol vanished, he could have sworn the Nixarian had looked directly at him, through the supposedly one-way glass, with eyes that seemed to plead for understanding. Eyes that reminded him of a lost kitten, searching desperately for connection in a world of indifference. The thought troubled him throughout his shift. It wasn't the first time he'd seen her drawing in the condensation, but it was the first time he'd paid attention. What was she trying to communicate? And more importantly, how had she known where he was standing? By the time his shift ended at 1800 hours, Jim had convinced himself he was imagining things. The Nixarian couldn't possibly see through the specialized polyglass. It was designed specifically to prevent exhibits from becoming distressed by the constant observation. Yet, as he made his final rounds, he found himself drawn back to her enclosure. The evening crowd had thinned, with only a few stragglers making their way through East Wing. A couple stood before the Nixarian's enclosure, pointing and laughing as they read the information display. "It says they're practically extinct," the woman said, pressing her face close to the glass. This one's the last. Can you believe it? Some kind of accident wiped out their planet or something. Not much of a loss, if you ask me. Her companion replied with a shrug. Looks like a fancy blue doll. Pretty, though. Bet she'd fetch a fortune if they ever decided to sell. Jim felt a surge of disgust at their callousness. But it was nothing new. He'd heard similar comments countless times. To most visitors, the beings in the menagerie were curiosities, exotic creatures to gawk at, not sentient individuals with thoughts, feelings, and histories. As the couple moved on, Jim noticed the Nixarian watching them go. Her expression unreadable, but her eyes, those lost kitten eyes, filled with something that might have been sorrow, or perhaps resignation. Then, slowly, deliberately, she turned her head toward the maintenance alcove where Jim stood, though he knew it should be impossible. He felt her gaze lock with his through the one-way glass. And in that moment, everything changed. Jim couldn't sleep that night. His small quarters in the station's residential sector felt claustrophobic as he tossed and turned, the image of those eyes haunting him. At no 300 hours, he gave up on sleep altogether and pulled out his personal tablet, sketching the symbol he'd seen her draw earlier. His rendering was crude, but it captured the essence of the flowing, intricate design. On impulse, he accessed the station's database, searching for information on Nixarian language and symbolism. The official records were sparse, noting only that Nixarians communicated primarily through a complex verbal language supplemented by telepathic resonance, with a written form that used pictographic elements. None of the examples matched what he'd seen. Expanding his search parameters, Jim began cross-referencing the symbol with other known languages. Hours passed as he sifted through linguistic databases, comparing, analyzing, searching for some connection. The station's night cycle was almost over when he found it, not in the Nixarian records, but in an ancient Earth database. The symbol bore a striking resemblance to Proto-Elamite script, a mysterious language discovered in archaeological sites dating back 5,000 years on Earth. Scholars had never fully deciphered it, but many believed it predated human civilization, possibly originating from an unknown precursor culture. Jim sat back, stunned. How could a Nixarian, from a planet dozens of light-years from Earth, be drawing symbols that matched an ancient Earth language? It couldn't be coincidence. There had to be a connection, one that the menagerie's official records failed to mention. His curiosity thoroughly piqued. Jim made a decision that would change the course of his life. He would find a way to communicate with Specimen 734. He would discover what she was trying to tell him. Over the next week, Jim's obsession grew. During his daily maintenance routines, he lingered longer at the Nixarian's enclosure, studying her, searching for clues. She continued to draw symbols in the condensation, different each time, but all bearing that same ancient quality. He documented each one, building a catalog that he compared against the Proto-Elamite database. The pattern was undeniable. The symbols weren't random. They were a form of communication, archaic, but systematic. But what was she trying to say? Jim knew accessing the Nixarian's personal records would be a breach of protocol, potentially grounds for termination. But the mystery had taken hold of him, compelling him forward despite the risks. Late one night, using his engineering access codes, he bypassed the security protocols and accessed the classified file on Specimen 734. What he found horrified him. Her name was Lanira, not Specimen 734, as the public displays indicated. She was indeed the last of her kind, but the accident that destroyed her world was no accident at all. The file documented a controlled extinction event, a deliberate act of genocide masked as a natural disaster. The Nixarians, it seemed, possessed knowledge that certain powerful entities found threatening, ancient wisdom about something called the Cedar Network that connected disparate species across the galaxy. Most disturbing of all was a note recommending memory suppression to prevent Lanira from accessing or communicating any of this dangerous knowledge. The menagerie wasn't preserving her as the last of her kind. They were containing her, ensuring that whatever secret she carried would die with her. Jim closed the file, his hands shaking. The implication was clear. Lanira wasn't drawing random symbols. She was trying to preserve the very knowledge they were attempting to suppress. And somehow, she knew he was watching. She had chosen him as a recipient for this forbidden message. He needed to find a way to communicate with her directly. For the next 3 days, Jim worked tirelessly in his off hours, developing a device that might allow him to speak with Lanira without being detected. The result was crude, but functional. A vibration communicator that could transmit sound through the polylass without alerting the monitoring systems. By attaching it to the maintenance panel and speaking softly, his voice would resonate through the barrier, audible only to someone pressed against the other side. His opportunity came during the early morning maintenance check, before the menagerie opened to visitors. As usual, Lanira sat in the center of her enclosure, seemingly lost in meditation. Jim attached his device to the panel and, heart racing, whispered, "Can you hear me?" For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, Lanira opened her eyes and turned toward the maintenance panel. Rising with fluid grace, she approached the wall and placed her palm against it. "I hear you," she replied, her voice soft and melodic, with an accent he couldn't place. "You are the one who sees me." Jim's breath caught in his throat. "Yes," he managed. "My name is Jim Praxton." "Jim," she repeated, as if tasting the name. "I am Lanira, not 734 as they call me." "I know," Jim said. I found your file. I know what they did to your people." A shadow passed over her features. "Then you know why I must preserve what they wish to erase. The symbols?" "Proto-Elamite," Jim supplied. "They match an ancient script from my world." Lanira's eyes widened. "The cedar tongue," she whispered. "You recognize it." "Not me personally, but our scholars have found examples of it. No one knows what it means." "It is the language of our shared ancestors," Lanira said, her voice taking on a reverent quality. "Before the separation, before the forgetting, it speaks of the connection that binds all cedar children, your people and mine." Jim struggled to process this. "You're saying humans and Nyxarians are related?" "More than related. We are siblings of the first world. The Cedar Network remembers, even when we forget." She pressed her palm more firmly against the glass. "I have waited for someone who would see me, truly see me. The others look, but they do not see." Jim placed his hand against the glass, mirroring hers. Though the barrier separated them, he felt a strange resonance, as if something within him recognized something within her. "I want to help you," he said, "but I don't know how." Lanira's expression grew solemn. "They will erase me soon. I have resisted their memory suppression, but my strength wanes. If the knowledge is to survive, I must leave this place. We must activate the Cedar Node." "Cedar Node?" "A nexus point of the ancient network. There is one on your world, beneath the structure you call the Great Pyramid. If we can reach it, we can awaken the memory in all Cedar children. The truth cannot be contained once it is shared." Jim took a deep breath. What she was suggesting was beyond reckless. It was potentially treasonous. Helping an exhibit escape, traveling to Earth without authorization, accessing a restricted historical site. Any one of these actions could result in severe punishment. Yet as he looked into Lanira's eyes, those lost kitten eyes that had first arrested his attention, he knew he couldn't turn away. Whatever the cost, he had to help her. "I'll get you out," he promised. "But it won't be easy." Nothing worthwhile ever is, Lanira replied with the ghost of a smile. When the false night comes, I will be ready. Jim spent the next 2 days planning their escape. The menagerie security was formidable but not impenetrable. As a life support engineer, he had access to areas most staff didn't, including the maintenance corridors that ran behind the enclosures. The challenge would be creating a distraction significant enough to draw security away while he extracted Lanira from her enclosure. The solution came from an unexpected source. During a routine maintenance check, his colleague, Technician Morales, mentioned that security would be upgrading the systems in North Wing the following evening. They're installing that new neural pattern detection software, Morales said casually, supposed to alert if any of the exhibits show unusual brain activity. Can you imagine? As if these creatures are plotting something. Jim forced a laugh, but his mind was racing. The security upgrade would provide the perfect cover. If he could trigger an atmospheric anomaly in North Wing, nothing dangerous, just unusual enough to demand immediate attention, it would draw security away from East Wing long enough for him to free Lanira. That night, he modified a portable atmospheric regulator, programming it to release a harmless but detectable gas mixture that would trigger the alarms. He also acquired a maintenance uniform that might fit Lanira, allowing her to move through the station without immediate detection. The final piece of the puzzle was transportation. They couldn't simply walk off the station, they needed a vessel. The waste reclamation shuttles offered the best option. They departed regularly, were minimally monitored, and followed a route that would take them near enough to Earth to make the journey feasible. When his shift ended the following day, Jim didn't return to his quarters. Instead, he made his way to a seldom-used storage area near the shuttle bay and waited for the station's night cycle to begin. At 2200 hours, when visitor traffic had ceased and most staff had retired, he activated his modified regulator remotely, sending it to North Wing via a maintenance drone. The alarms began wailing almost immediately. Emergency protocols activated, sealing North Wing and summoning security personnel from throughout the station. Jim watched on his terminal as the security presence in East Wing dropped to minimal levels. Moving quickly, he made his way through the service corridors to the maintenance alcove behind Lanira's enclosure. The access panel required his engineering codes, a legitimate use that wouldn't trigger suspicion. Once inside, he attached a bypass device to the enclosure's interior panel, overriding the security protocols. With a soft hiss, the hidden door slid open. Lanira stood waiting, her silver-white hair gleaming in the dim emergency lighting that had activated when the alarms began. "They've noticed the atmospheric disturbance," she said, her voice calm despite the circumstances. "They suspect sabotage." Jim handed her the maintenance uniform. "Put this on quickly. We need to move before they realize it's a diversion." As Lanira changed, Jim kept watch, monitoring security movements on his terminal. The distraction was working better than he'd hoped. All available personnel had been directed to North Wing to investigate the anomaly and ensure the safety of the valuable exhibits there. Once Lanira was dressed, they slipped out of the maintenance alcove and into the service corridor. Jim led the way, navigating the labyrinthine passages that wound through the station's infrastructure. They encountered no one. The corridors were designed for efficiency, not comfort, and few staff used them unless necessary. "The waste reclamation shuttle leaves in 20 minutes, Jim whispered as they approached the processing station. "We'll need to hide among the cargo until we're clear of the station." Lanira nodded, her movements fluid and silent as she followed him. Despite never having been outside her enclosure since arriving at the menagerie, she showed no hesitation or disorientation. Her awareness of her surroundings was acute, her adaptability remarkable. The processing station was automated, with only minimal staff supervision. As they approached, Jim activated his terminal, triggering a diagnostic sequence in the station's systems. The lights flickered momentarily, providing cover as they slipped past the single technician on duty and into the cargo hold of the waiting shuttle. The hold was cramped and pungent with the smell of processed waste materials, but it offered concealment among the sealed containers. Jim and Lanira wedged themselves into a space between two large bins, pulling a tarp over themselves for additional cover. "Once we're underway, I'll hack the navigation system," Jim whispered. "We'll divert to Earth, but we'll need to be careful. Unauthorized planetary entry is heavily monitored." Lanira placed her hand on his arm, her touch cool and strangely electric. "The cedar will guide us," she said with quiet confidence. "It remembers the way home." Before Jim could respond, the shuttle's engines rumbled to life. The floor beneath them vibrated as the vessel disengaged from the station and began its pre-programmed journey to the central waste processing facility. Their escape had begun. For the first hour, they remained hidden in the cargo hold, listening to the rhythmic hum of the engines and the occasional automated announcement from the shuttle systems. When Jim was certain they were well away from Proxima Station, he emerged from their hiding place and made his way to the shuttle's control cabin. The waste reclamation shuttles were designed for efficiency rather than security. Their routes were fixed, their operations largely automated. Overriding the navigation system required only moderate technical skill, something Jim possessed in abundance. "We're in luck," he told Lanira when he returned. "This model has minimal AI oversight. I've set a new course for Earth, specifically Egypt. We should arrive in approximately 6 hours." "Egypt," Lanira repeated, her eyes lighting with recognition. "The Great Pyramid, the strongest cedar node on your world." "Why there?" Jim asked as they settled more comfortably in a corner of the hold. "What makes it special?" Lanira's expression grew distant, as if looking into a past beyond memory. "The Cedar Children built it as a beacon, a nexus of the network. It was meant to maintain the connection between worlds, to prevent the forgetting. But time erodes even the strongest intentions. Your people forgot its purpose, seeing only stone and mystery." "And your people remembered?" "We remembered longer," she said with a touch of sadness. "But even we began to forget. Only those of us trained in the old ways, the knowledge keepers, retained the full memory of the Cedar Network. I was the youngest, still in training when—" Her voice faltered. Jim reached out instinctively, taking her hand. Her skin was smooth and cool against his, the texture unlike anything he'd ever felt. "I'm sorry," he said, inadequate words for an unspeakable loss. Lanira's fingers tightened around his. "Do not apologize for what you did not do. It is the menagerie, and those who control it who bear responsibility. They feared what the Cedar Network might reveal, that we are not separate, not alien to one another, but branches of the same ancient tree." "Why would that be threatening?" "Because it challenges the foundations of power," she explained. "Those who rule do so by dividing, by emphasizing difference and distance. If humans discovered their kinship with beings they've classified as alien, how long before they questioned other divisions? How long before they demanded unity rather than separation?" Jim considered this, a new understanding dawning. The menagerie wasn't simply a zoo or museum. It was a tool of control, reinforcing the narrative that sentient species were fundamentally different, inherently separate. Lanira's knowledge threatened that narrative at its core. Their conversation continued as the shuttle journeyed toward Earth, Lanira sharing fragments of Nyxarian culture and history, while Jim explained how humanity had developed since the forgetting. Despite the gravity of their situation, Jim found himself laughing at times, moved at others, as they discovered commonalities and differences between their experiences. 4 hours into their journey, an alarm shattered their temporary peace. "Unauthorized course deviation detected," announced the shuttle's automated system. "Returning to programmed route. Security protocols engaged." Jim rushed to the control cabin, Lanira close behind. The navigation panel flashed with warning lights as the system attempted to reassert control. "They've detected us," Jim said grimly, fingers flying over the controls. "The menagerie must have realized you're missing and tracked the shuttle." Lanira pointed to a blinking icon on the display. "What is that?" "Pursuit vessel," Jim confirmed after checking the sensor readings. "Military grade. We can't outrun it." "We don't need to outrun it," Lanira said, her voice steady. "We only need to reach the Cedar node. Once activated, it will protect us." Jim wasn't convinced, but he had no better plan. The waste shuttle wasn't designed for evasive maneuvers or combat. Their only hope was reaching Earth before they were intercepted. He bypassed the shuttle's safety protocols, pushing its engines beyond recommended limits. The vessel shuddered, metal groaning in protest as it accelerated toward Earth. "They're gaining," Jim reported, watching the pursuit vessel close the distance on the scanner. "We have maybe 20 minutes before they're in range to disable us." Lanira moved to stand beside him, studying the navigation display. "Can we alter our entry vector? Approach from an unexpected angle?" Jim considered this. "Yes, but it's risky. Atmospheric entry is precisely calculated. Deviating could result in burnup." "A risk we must take," she said firmly. "The Cedar node can be accessed through an entrance beneath the eastern face of the Great Pyramid. We need to land as close as possible." Adjusting their approach, Jim steered the shuttle toward Earth's atmosphere at a steeper angle than standard protocols allowed. The vessel groaned ominously as they began entry, external temperature readings climbing rapidly as friction heated the hull. "Brace yourself," Jim warned as turbulence rocked the shuttle. "This will be rough." The pursuit vessel followed them into atmosphere, maintaining its relentless chase despite the hazardous conditions. As they descended through cloud layers, Egypt's desert landscape came into view below, a vast expanse of golden sand with the distinctive silhouette of the Giza pyramid complex visible in the distance. "There," Lanira pointed. "The Great Pyramid. We must reach its eastern base." But before Jim could adjust their trajectory, a blast from the pursuit vessel struck their left engine. The shuttle lurched violently, systems failing as it began an uncontrolled descent. "We're going down!" Jim shouted, fighting with the remaining controls to direct their crash landing away from populated areas. "Hold on to something!" The shuttle plummeted toward the desert, its single functioning engine screaming in protest as Jim struggled to maintain some semblance of control. With a bone-jarring impact, they hit the sand, skidding hundreds of meters before coming to rest in a cloud of dust and debris. For a moment, everything was silent except for the hiss of ruptured hydraulic lines and the settling of displaced sand. Jim blinked, disoriented, and reached out to check on Lanira. She was already moving, unfastening her restraints and assessing the damage. "Are you injured?" she asked, helping him to his feet. Jim took stock, flexing limbs and testing for pain. "Nothing serious. You?" "I am functional," she replied, her attention already shifting to the situation outside. Through the cracked view screen, they could see the pursuit vessel completing a more controlled landing nearby. "We need to move," Jim said urgently. "The pyramid is about 2 kilometers east. If we can reach it before they organize." Lanira nodded, and together they forced open the damaged exit hatch. Hot desert air rushed in, carrying the scent of sand and ancient stone. They emerged into blinding sunlight, the Great Pyramid looming in the distance like a sentinel from another age. They ran, sand shifting treacherously beneath their feet as they made their desperate dash across the desert. Behind them, figures emerged from the pursuit vessel, security personnel in the distinctive uniform of the menagerie. Led by a tall, imposing figure Jim recognized from station briefings, Director Threll, administrator of the board action sector that included Proxima Station. "They're following," Jim gasped as they ran. "How do we access this Cedar node once we reach the pyramid?" "There is an entrance hidden beneath the sand on the eastern face," Lanira replied, her breathing controlled despite their pace. A metal panel inscribed with cedar script. "We must find it." The pyramid grew larger as they approached, its immense stone blocks radiating heat accumulated over millennia under the Egyptian sun. They reached its base, circling toward the eastern face as Lanira had indicated. Behind them, their pursuers were gaining ground, weapons drawn. "Spread out," Lanira directed when they reached the eastern side. "Look for any disturbance in the sand, any pattern that seems unnatural." They searched frantically, digging through hot sand as the sound of pursuit grew closer. Jim's hands were raw, and his lungs burned from exertion when his fingers struck something solid, a smooth surface unlike the rough limestone of the pyramid. "Here," he called to Lanira. "I found something." Together, they cleared away the sand, revealing a large metal panel embedded in the ground at the pyramid's base. Its surface was etched with symbols Jim recognized from Lanira's drawings: Proto-Elamite script, the cedar tongue. The metal itself was unlike any alloy he'd encountered, with a faint, bluish tint that seemed to pulse subtly beneath the surface. "The cedar node," Lanira breathed, her voice filled with reverence. "After all this time—" "Stop right there!" commanded a harsh voice behind them. They turned to find Director Threll and 6 security guards approaching, weapons trained on them. Threll was an imposing figure, even by Varaxian standards, tall and broad-shouldered, with mottled gray skin and eyes that gleamed with cold intelligence. "Step away from the artifact," Threll ordered. "Specimen 734, you are property of the Galactic Menagerie. Engineer Praxton, you are under arrest for theft of valuable property and unauthorized planetary entry." Jim moved protectively in front of Lanira. "She's not property. She's a sentient being with rights and knowledge you've tried to suppress." Threll's expression hardened. "That knowledge threatens the stability of 13 sectors. The Cedar Network is a myth, a dangerous delusion that has already led to unnecessary conflict. Stand aside, Praxton. This doesn't concern you." "It concerns all of us," Jim replied, standing his ground. "You orchestrated the extinction of an entire species to hide the truth. What are you so afraid of?" "I fear chaos," Threll said simply. "The belief in a shared origin, in some mystical connection between species, undermines the natural order. Different species evolve separately, as nature intended. This fiction of a common ancestry serves only to destabilize established hierarchies." While Threll spoke, Lanira had moved closer to Jim, her hand brushing against his. He felt a strange tingling sensation where their skin made contact, as if a current passed between them. "The resonance," she whispered, barely audible. "Place your hand on the panel when I tell you. Do not hesitate, no matter what you see or feel." Before Jim could respond, Threll signaled to his guards. "Enough talking. Secure them both." As the guards advanced, Lanira suddenly dropped to her knees beside the metal panel, placing both palms flat against its surface. "Now, Jim!" she cried. Acting on instinct, Jim knelt and pressed his hand to the panel. Immediately, an electric sensation shot up his arm, racing through his nervous system like liquid fire. Symbols identical to those on the panel appeared on his skin, glowing with blue-white light that pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat. The guards faltered, taken aback by the phenomenon. Threll shouted something, but his voice seemed distant, drowned out by a rising hum that emanated from the panel beneath their hands. The sand around them began to vibrate, cascading away from the panel to reveal more of the metallic surface beneath. The humming grew louder, and a beam of intense blue light shot upward from the panel, striking the apex of the Great Pyramid above. For a moment, everything seemed frozen in a tableau of amazement and fear. Then, the beam expanded, engulfing the pyramid in a dome of pulsating blue energy that spread outward, washing over Jim and Lanira. Then, Threll and his guards. Where it touched the menagerie personnel, they collapsed to their knees, eyes wide with shock or revelation. Jim felt knowledge pouring into his mind, not as words or images, but as direct understanding. He saw the Cedar children, ancient beings who had seeded dozens of worlds with their genetic material, creating variations that would evolve into different, yet fundamentally related species. He saw the network they had established to maintain connection across vast distances, nodes on each world serving as both repository of knowledge and conduit for communication. And he understood why the menagerie feared this knowledge. The Cedar network didn't merely suggest common ancestry. It proved it, irrefutably. More than that, it offered a means of direct communication between species that transcended language and cultural barriers. A true democracy of sentience that would render organizations like the menagerie obsolete. The blue energy continued to expand, racing across Earth's surface in a wave of awakening. Wherever it touched, Cedar nodes long dormant flared to life, beneath Stonehenge and Machu Picchu, within the structures of Angkor Wat and the statues of Easter Island. And with each activation, human minds opened to memories not their own, genetic knowledge passed down through millennia finally unlocked. As the energy wave encircled the globe, Lanira turned to Jim, her eyes luminous with a joy he'd never seen in them before. "It is done," she said. "The remembering has begun." Threll staggered to his feet, his expression a mixture of awe and dismay. "What have you done?" he demanded, though the authority had drained from his voice. "We have awakened the truth," Lanira replied calmly. "The Cedar network is active again, reconnecting all its children. Your menagerie can no longer contain us, can no longer divide us." As if in confirmation of her words, the pursuit vessel's communication system suddenly activated, broadcasting on an open channel. Reports flooded in from across the galaxy, Cedar nodes awakening on dozens of worlds, dormant knowledge surging to life in countless minds, and with it, the revelation of the menagerie's true purpose, not preservation, but suppression. It was never about protecting endangered species, Jim realized aloud. It was about containing dangerous knowledge, isolating those who might remember the Cedar network. Threll didn't deny it. "We did what was necessary for stability," he said, though his conviction seemed to waver. "Different species must remain separate. The natural order is not what you thought it was," Lanira interrupted gently. "The natural order includes connection as well as distinction. We are diverse branches of the same ancient tree, meant to learn from one another, not to be divided by artificial boundaries." The blue energy that had enveloped the pyramid began to coalesce, concentrating into a vibrant column that shot skyward, visible for hundreds of kilometers in all directions. Similar columns appeared around the globe as other Cedar nodes activated fully, creating a network of light that encircled the planet. In cities worldwide, humans stopped and stared in wonder as memories not their own unfolded in their minds, glimpses of ancient knowledge, fragments of a heritage far older than recorded history. And in the menageries scattered throughout the galaxy, other captive specimens felt the resonance, their own suppressed memories surging to the surface. The guards who had accompanied Threll were now sitting on the sand, weapons forgotten as they grappled with the flood of new awareness. Threll himself seemed diminished somehow, the certainty that had driven him giving way to confusion and doubt. "The Vaxians will retaliate," he warned, making one last attempt to assert control. "They have invested too much in the current order to allow this disruption." "The Vaxians are also Cedar children," Lanira replied, "though they have forgotten more thoroughly than most. They too will remember, in time." As if summoned by her words, the pursuit vessel's engines suddenly engaged, lifting it from the desert floor without any visible pilot. It hovered for a moment, then accelerated skyward, disappearing into the blue expanse above. "The Cedar network has asserted control," Lanira explained, watching it go. "It will return the vessel to its origin point, carrying the awakening with it. Jim looked around at the transformed landscape. The Great Pyramid bathed in blue light, the desert sand glittering with reflected energy, the collapsed guards beginning to stir with new awareness in their eyes. "What happens now?" he asked. Lanira smiled, and for the first time since he'd known her, the sorrow was gone from her eyes. "Now we rebuild. The Cedar Network will guide us, connecting human and Nixarian and all other Cedar children in shared purpose. The divisions created by time and distance will begin to heal." 6 months later, Jim stood with Lanira on a hillside overlooking the Giza Plateau. The Great Pyramid still glowed with a subtle blue radiance, though the dramatic light show of the awakening had subsided. Around its base, a complex of new structures had emerged, research facilities where humans and Nixarians worked side by side, studying the Cedar Network and the ancient knowledge it contained. "I received word today," Lanira said, her silver-white hair stirring in the desert breeze. "They've located another Nixarian outpost, a small colony that escaped the controlled extinction. Nearly 300 of my people, preserved in stasis on a moon in the Andromeda sector." Jim squeezed her hand, sharing her joy. "That's wonderful news. When will they arrive?" "The transport vessel launches next week. They should reach Earth within the month." Her expression grew thoughtful. "It is strange to think that without the menagerie's cruelty, we might never have rediscovered the Cedar Network. Sometimes, the greatest darkness precedes the brightest dawn." In the 6 months since the awakening, the galactic landscape had transformed. The revelation of common ancestry had indeed destabilized established power structures, as Threll had feared. But in place of chaos, a new order was emerging, one based on cooperation rather than dominance, on shared heritage rather than enforced division. The menagerie itself had been repurposed, its exhibits freed, and its facilities converted into centers for cross-species education and cultural exchange. Threll, after a period of resistance, had eventually embraced the new reality, his administrative skills now directed toward facilitating cooperation rather than enforcing separation. "Do you ever regret it?" Lanira asked suddenly, turning to face Jim. "Risking everything to help me. Your career, your life on the station." Jim smiled, looking out over the transformed landscape below, where once he had been merely a maintenance engineer, tending systems without question. He was now part of something far greater, a reconnection of species separated by millennia of forgetting. "Not for a moment," he replied honestly. "Some risks are worth taking, some truths worth fighting for, and some connections." He met her gaze, those once lost kitten eyes, now bright with purpose and joy. "Some connections are simply meant to be." As they turned to descend the hillside, a gleaming vessel rose from the complex below, its design a harmonious blend of human and Nixarian technology. It ascended into the evening sky, the first of many joint missions to reconnect the scattered children of the First World. Behind it streamed a tail of blue energy, the Cedar Network's blessing, guiding them home to the stars.